Hey, Tater Tots. I have another story to share with you, and it's called Rumpelstiltskin. Hopefully, you guys remember I shared another version of this with you before we left for break. And this one is just another version of that same story. So think about, if you remember it, think about things that are maybe the same in both of the books and things that are different. Rumpelstiltskin. Once there was a miller who was always making up far-fetched stories. One day he told everyone that his beautiful daughter could spin straw into gold. The king came to hear about this. He asked to meet the miller's beautiful daughter. Then the king took the miller and his daughter to a room full of straw. "Your daughter is beautiful, but is she clever enough to spin all of this straw into gold by morning?" asked the king. "Of course, your majesty," said the miller. So the miller's daughter was left alone in the room for the night. She looked at all the straw and began to cry. "How can I possibly spin this straw into gold?" she asked. "It was just one of my father's silly stories." Just then the door opened a crack, and in slipped a tiny little man.
"What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold for you?"
said the little man. "All I can give you is my locket," said the miller's daughter. The little man took her locket, sat down at the spinning wheel, and began to spin. The next morning the king was amazed to see that all the straw had been spun into gold. "That's nothing," said the miller. "Give her more straw, and she will give your majesty more gold." So the next night the miller's daughter was taken into a bigger room full of even more straw. Once again she began to cry, and once again the little man appeared.
"What will you give me if I spin all this straw into gold?"
he asked her. "All I can give you is the ring from my finger," said the miller's daughter. The little man took her ring, sat down at the spinning wheel, and began to spin. The next morning the king was again amazed. "Your daughter is not only beautiful, but she's also very clever," he said. In fact, the king was so taken with the miller's daughter that he asked the miller if he could marry her. The miller didn't bother telling his daughter about this. Instead, he said to the king, "Of course she will marry you. But first, why don't you ask her to spin one more room full of straw into gold to help pay for the wedding?" So I'm thinking right now, this is different than the version we read at school, because remember in that version, the king was really, really greedy and he kept wanting more and wanting more. In this version, the miller, her own father, is the one who keeps telling the king to ask for more. And so the miller's daughter was taken to an even bigger room full of straw and left to spin it into gold. The poor girl cried and cried. "The king is a kind man, but in the morning, when he sees that I cannot spin straw into gold, he will be angry," she said. "My father and I will be thrown into prison for telling lies to the king." Once again, the little man appeared.
"What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold?"
he asked the miller's daughter. "I have nothing left to give you," she said.
"Then promise me this," said the little man. "If the king should marry you and make you his queen, you must give me your firstborn child to keep."
"I'm just a poor miller's daughter," she said. "I'm sure the king would not want to marry me." And so she agreed to the little man's demand. Immediately, the little man sat down at the spinning wheel and began to spin. In the morning, the king told the miller that he could keep all of the gold, and he asked the miller's daughter if she would marry him. She was amazed. But she said yes, and so they were married, and she became the queen. The miller's daughter was so happy that she forgot all about the little man and her promise. In time, she gave birth to a son. She and the king were so pleased. But one day the little man appeared again.
I have come to collect the child you promised me,
he said. The miller's daughter began to weep. She begged him to change his mind. Finally, he said,
I will give you 3 days. If in that time you can guess my name, I will let you keep the child.
The miller's daughter was in such despair. She went to the king and told him the whole story. Immediately, the king sent messengers to all corners of the land to seek out unusual names. On the first day, when the little man came to the miller's daughter, she said, Is your name Casper, or Balthazar, or Melchior?
No, said the little man.
On the second day, she said, Is your name Short Ribs, or Sheepshanks, or Lace Legs?
No, said the little man.
The king and the miller's daughter were desperate now. But on the last day, one of the messengers returned saying that he had seen a strange little man dancing around a fire and singing.
Merrily I laugh and play. The royal child is mine today. The queen will lose the guessing game, for Rumpelstiltskin is my name.
When the little man came to the miller's daughter, she said, Is your name Quentin, or Marmaduke, or Donegal?
No, the little man shrieked with glee. You have but one guess left.
Then she said, Your name must be Rumpelstiltskin. The little man was furious. He stomped his foot so hard the whole castle shook.
The wicked witch must have told you,
he screamed, and he ran off and was never seen again. As for the king and the miller's daughter and their child, they all lived happily ever after. That's how a lot of those fairy tales end, isn't it? Okay, so I hope you liked this version of Rumpelstiltskin. Like I said, try to think about some things that are similar to the version that we read at school, if you can remember back that far, and then try to think about some things that were different in this version. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll see you soon.